The neighborhood. We're neighbors.
Well, I called you about a week ago to come play tennis, and you called and you didn't show.
I know.
Johnny Carson was one of the most recognizable faces in television history. But behind his calm smile and legendary career, his private life was far more complicated than most people ever realized. When he passed away, what was revealed about his final wishes left many people shocked and confused. The details of his $156 million estate raised more questions than answers, especially about the one person he chose to leave almost everything to. Join us as we break down the hidden story behind Johnny Carson's fortune. Humble beginnings. Johnny Carson was born in 1925 in Corning, Iowa. His full name was John William Carson. He came into the world during a time when life in rural America was simple, but often difficult, especially for families trying to make a stable living. Not long after his birth, his family moved to Nebraska, where he spent most of his childhood. This early change in location played a big role in shaping his personality and outlook on life. Growing up in Nebraska during the Great Depression was not easy. Money was tight for most families, including his own. People had to be careful with spending, and entertainment options were limited. Despite these challenges, Carson's early home life was stable and supportive. He spent much of his time observing the world around him and developing a quiet sense of humor. Even as a child, he showed signs of being thoughtful, observant, and curious about how people reacted to jokes and stories. One of the first things that sparked his interest in entertainment was magic. Carson became fascinated with simple magic tricks at a young age. He did not have professional tools or training, but he practiced small tricks and illusions on his own. He would perform them for family members and friends, learning quickly that people enjoyed being surprised and amused. This early interest in magic helped him build confidence in performing in front of others. Around the same time, radio became an important part of American homes, including his. Carson listened closely to radio programs, especially comedy shows and variety programs. These broadcasts introduced him to timing, delivery, and voice control. Without seeing the performers, he focused only on how they used their voices to make people laugh. This helped him understand that words and tone alone could create strong entertainment. As he grew older, Carson went to school in Nebraska and continued to develop his interest in performance. He was not known as the loudest or most outgoing student, but he had a sharp mind and a strong ability to observe people. Teachers and classmates noticed that he had a natural sense of timing when he spoke. He often took part in small school activities where he had a chance to experiment with performing in front of others. During his teenage years, Carson began to think more seriously about a future in entertainment. He did not have a clear path yet, but he knew he enjoyed making people laugh and holding their attention. He continued practicing magic tricks and sometimes performed at small local events. These early performances were simple, but they gave him valuable experience in dealing with audiences. After finishing high school, Carson briefly attended the University of Nebraska. His time there helped him explore different interests, but his attention kept returning to performance and entertainment. He eventually decided to pursue a career that could allow him to work in radio or live performance. This decision marked the beginning of his journey into the entertainment world. Even in these early years, it was clear that Carson had a strong desire to connect with audiences. He was still learning and developing his style, but the foundation of his future success was already taking shape through small, steady steps. His early life showed a quiet but steady progression toward something much larger, even though no one could yet predict how far it would take him. Breaking into television. After finishing his education and serving in the Navy during World War II, Johnny Carson slowly made his way into the world of broadcasting. His first real steps came through radio. At the time, radio was still one of the main sources of entertainment in American homes, and it gave new talent a place to learn before moving to television. Carson worked at small radio stations where he took on different roles, including writing scripts, announcing programs, and hosting small segments. These jobs did not bring him fame, but they helped him understand how to speak clearly, keep timing tight, and hold an audience's attention using only his voice. As he gained more experience, Carson began to move into television in the early 1950s. Television was still new, and many networks were trying to figure out what kind of shows worked best. Carson started with small appearances and minor hosting roles. He was not yet a major star, but his calm delivery and natural humor started to get noticed. He had a way of speaking that felt relaxed, which made him different from many other hosts who were more formal at the time. His first real opportunity to host a national show came when he took over a program called Who Do You Trust? In 1957. This was a major turning point in his career. The show involved interviews and quiz-style segments, and it allowed Carson to interact directly with guests. He used this space to develop his interviewing style, which later became one of his strongest skills. Instead of pushing guests too hard, he kept conversations light, smooth, and easy to follow. This made guests feel comfortable, which in turn made the audience enjoy watching him more. During this period, Carson also started shaping his on-camera persona. He worked on his comedic timing, learning when to pause, when to respond quickly, and how to adjust his tone depending on the situation. He avoided being overly loud or dramatic. Instead, he focused on being steady and controlled. This helped him stand out in a growing television industry that was still experimenting with different styles of hosting. Even as his popularity slowly increased, Carson faced real struggles behind the scenes. Television networks had strong expectations, and they often wanted hosts to fit a certain mold. There was pressure to perform in a way that matched ratings goals and sponsor demands. At the same time, competition among television personalities was growing quickly. Many talented hosts were trying to secure long-term positions, and not everyone could succeed at the same level. Carson had to work through uncertainty and constant comparison with other rising stars. He had to prove that his style was not only different but also effective. There were moments when his future in television was not fully secure, and he had to adapt to changing demands from producers and executives. Still, he continued improving his skills and building trust with audiences. By the end of the 1950s, Carson was no longer just a local or minor television figure. He was becoming known across the country as a reliable and engaging host. His work on Who Do You Trust? Helped him build the foundation for something much bigger as more people began to recognize his name and style. This steady rise set the stage for a major shift in his career that would soon change late-night television forever: The Tonight Show. In 1962, Johnny Carson took over as the host of The Tonight Show, and this moment changed his career completely. The show was already known, but it was Carson who turned it into a cultural institution. When he stepped in as host, he replaced Jack Paar and moved the program into a new phase that would define late-night television for decades. From that point on, his name became closely tied to American entertainment. Carson quickly reshaped how late-night television worked. Before him, talk shows often felt stiff or overly formal. Carson made things feel more natural and easy to watch. He created a relaxed atmosphere where guests could talk freely without feeling pressured. His calm presence helped the show feel more personal, even though it was broadcast to millions of people every night. This approach made viewers feel like they were part of a casual conversation rather than a staged program. One of the most important parts of his success was his monologue style. At the start of each show, Carson would stand alone and deliver jokes based on current events, politics, and everyday life. His timing was careful, and he knew how to pause or adjust his tone for effect. These monologues became a regular part of American television culture. People often tuned in just to hear his opening remarks, which set the tone for the rest of the program. Another major part of his style was his guest interviews. Carson had a unique way of talking to celebrities, comedians, and public figures. He made them feel comfortable, which often led to natural and funny conversations. Many guests saw appearing on his show as an important moment in their careers. A strong appearance on The Tonight Show could help launch or boost a performer's fame. Carson's ability to draw out genuine reactions from guests made the show more engaging and unpredictable. As the years went on, Carson's influence on American pop culture continued to grow. He helped shape how celebrities were introduced to the public. A successful appearance on his show often meant national attention. Comedians, actors, and musicians all saw him as a key figure who could open doors for them. His show became a central place where new talent was discovered, and established stars maintained their public image. Behind the scenes, however, the pressure was intense. Hosting a live show every weeknight for decades required constant preparation and focus. Carson had to stay updated on news, work with writers, and adjust his material regularly. Even though he made it look easy on screen, the job demanded discipline and consistency. There was very little room for mistakes, and he had to deliver quality content night after night for years. Over time, Carson became one of the highest-paid entertainers in television history. His contract reflected his importance to the network and the massive audience he brought in. He was not just a host, but also a major business figure in the television industry. His success showed how powerful late-night television had become in American media. By the end of this era, Johnny Carson was not just a television personality. He was a central figure in entertainment who helped define what late-night television would look like for generations. His rise to fame, however, was only one side of his life, as his personal world was far more complicated than his public image suggested. 4 marriages. Johnny Carson's personal life was far more complicated than what audiences saw on television. While he appeared calm, funny, and in control on The Tonight Show, his relationships told a different story. Over the years, he went through 4 marriages, and each one showed different struggles with communication, emotional distance, and the demands of fame. His first marriage was to Jody Wolcott in 1949, long before he became a national television figure. At the time, Carson was still building his career in radio and early television. They had 3 sons together, and at first, the marriage looked stable. However, as Carson's career began to grow, pressure increased. Long working hours and constant travel started to affect the relationship. Over time, trust issues and personal differences created tension. The marriage eventually ended in divorce in 1963. This was also the same period when his career was reaching new heights, which made the personal breakup even more difficult behind the scenes. His second marriage was to Joanne Copeland in 1963, shortly after his first divorce. This relationship also struggled quickly. Copeland came from a different background, and adjusting to Carson's rising fame was not easy. Their marriage was marked by emotional distance and frequent disagreements. Friends and people close to them described the relationship as unstable and tense. It did not last long, and they divorced in 1972. This period showed that even as Carson's public image grew stronger, his private life was becoming more complicated. Soon after, Carson entered his third marriage with Joanna Holland in 1973. This relationship lasted longer than his previous ones, but it also faced major problems. By this time, Carson was already one of the biggest television stars in America. His schedule was demanding, and he often focused heavily on work. Holland reportedly felt increasingly isolated as Carson spent more time on The Tonight Show and less time at home. The emotional distance between them grew over the years, and they eventually divorced in 1985. This marriage reflected a pattern that was becoming more clear in Carson's life. Work often came before personal relationships. His fourth and final marriage was to Alexis Moss in 1987. Unlike his earlier relationships, this marriage was quieter and more private. Moss was significantly younger, and the two lived a more low-profile life compared to Carson's earlier years. This relationship appeared more stable, especially as Carson began to step back from television. They remained together until his death in 2005. Many people saw this final marriage as a more peaceful chapter in his personal life. Across all 4 marriages, a clear pattern appeared. Carson was deeply committed to his career, and that often left little room for emotional connection at home. His work schedule and focus on success created distance in his relationships. Even when there was love and effort, the demands of fame made it difficult to maintain long-term stability. Publicly, Carson was seen as confident, humorous, and in control. He was admired by millions and respected in the entertainment industry. However, privately, his relationships showed a different side, one marked by emotional struggles, separation, and difficulty balancing personal needs with professional life. This contrast between public success and private instability became one of the defining parts of his story, especially as his fame continued to grow and his personal challenges remained mostly behind closed doors. As his career continued at full speed, even deeper tensions and controversies began to form behind the scenes. Affairs and rumors. Johnny Carson's life in Hollywood came with constant attention, and that attention also brought a lot of rumors. As one of the biggest television stars in America, he was always surrounded by celebrities, producers, comedians, and industry insiders. Because of this environment, stories about his personal life often spread quickly, even when they were not confirmed. Over the years, there were many alleged affairs and relationship rumors linked to Carson. Some of these came from tabloids, while others came from people in the entertainment industry who claimed to have known him personally. However, Carson himself rarely spoke publicly about these claims. He kept his private life very separate from his television persona, which made it even harder for the public to know what was true and what was speculation. What is clear is that Carson spent much of his time in Hollywood social circles. He was often seen at parties, industry events, and gatherings with other well-known figures. These events were part of the entertainment world at the time, where networking and social presence were important. Carson was known for being charming in public settings. He could easily talk with guests, comedians, and executives, and he knew how to make people feel comfortable during short interactions. At the same time, people who worked closely with him sometimes described a more distant side to his personality. While he was polite and professional, he was not always emotionally open. Some insiders said that he kept a strong personal boundary, even with people he worked with for many years. This created a contrast between the warm, funny television host and a more private, reserved person off camera. Fame also played a major role in how his relationships developed. Being constantly in the public eye made trust more difficult. Every action could become a topic of discussion, and rumors could spread quickly. This kind of pressure often affected how he connected with others. It became harder to know who could be trusted and who was influenced by his fame. Over time, this environment contributed to emotional distance in some of his personal relationships. As his career continued to dominate late-night television, the pressures around him only increased, and tensions behind the scenes began to grow in ways few people expected. Power struggles. Even though Johnny Carson looked calm and in control on screen, there were often serious tensions happening behind the scenes. As The Tonight Show grew into one of the most important programs on television, Carson's influence also grew. With that influence came power struggles, disagreements, and long negotiations that shaped much of his career. One major area of tension was his relationship with network executives. Carson worked under NBC, and while the network depended heavily on his success, they also had their own goals and rules. Over time, disagreements sometimes came up about contracts, scheduling, and creative control. Carson wanted more freedom over how the show was run, while the network wanted to maintain oversight. These discussions were not always public, but they were important in shaping how the show operated. Carson's strong position meant he had more leverage than most television hosts, but it did not remove conflict entirely. Within the entertainment industry, there were also quiet rivalries. Late-night television was becoming more competitive, and other hosts were trying to build their own audiences. While Carson remained the leader in the space, there were always comparisons and pressure from other programs. Some industry figures saw him as the standard to beat, which created both respect and competition at the same time. Even if these rivalries were not always openly hostile, they still added pressure to maintain his top position. Tension also occasionally appeared in his interactions with comedians and guests. Many performers saw The Tonight Show as a major opportunity, but not every appearance went smoothly. Carson had high expectations for timing, humor, and professionalism. If a guest did not match the flow of the show, things could feel awkward on air or backstage. Some comedians appreciated his control of the stage, while others felt pressure under his style of hosting. These moments did not happen every night, but they were part of the working environment. Behind the scenes, the workplace dynamics of The Tonight Show were very structured. Carson was the central figure, and most decisions flowed through him or his trusted team. Writers, producers, and crew members worked under tight schedules to prepare content for each night's broadcast. Because the show aired live 5 nights a week, there was very little room for delays or mistakes. This created a high-pressure environment where everyone had to stay focused and prepared at all times. Even though many of these conflicts were handled privately, they had a lasting impact on how Carson's career developed. They shaped how much control he had over his content, how the show was produced, and how long he remained in his position. While the public mostly saw a smooth and entertaining program, the reality behind it included constant discussions, adjustments, and professional pressure. Despite these challenges, Carson maintained his position at the top of late-night television for decades, even as tensions continued to exist behind the curtain. And as his career continued to demand more from him, personal struggles were quietly building in the background in ways few people fully saw. A drinking problem. As Johnny Carson's fame continued to grow, so did the pressure that came with it. Hosting The Tonight Show for so many years meant constant work, constant attention, and very little personal space. Over time, reports and rumors suggested that Carson went through periods of heavy drinking, especially during the most stressful parts of his career. While he rarely spoke about this publicly, people around him sometimes described moments where alcohol was part of his way of dealing with pressure. The demands of his job were intense. Carson was expected to perform live on television 5 nights a week, year after year. He had to stay sharp, funny, and updated on current events, no matter what was happening in his personal life. This kind of schedule created constant stress. For someone in his position, finding ways to relax and disconnect became very important. Like many entertainers of his time, he reportedly used alcohol as one of the ways to manage that stress. Even though he remained highly professional on screen, the off-camera pressure was always present. There were scripts to review, meetings to attend, and constant expectations from the network and the audience. Over the years, this level of responsibility built up. Friends and industry insiders sometimes mentioned that Carson could be private about how he handled stress, choosing not to openly discuss his personal struggles. As he got older, Carson began to reduce his public appearances. He started stepping back from events, interviews, and television guest spots. This was a noticeable change because for decades he had been one of the most visible figures in American entertainment. His focus slowly shifted away from public life and more toward privacy and personal time. In 1992, Carson made a major decision to retire from The Tonight Show. After more than 30 years as its host, he stepped down, marking the end of an era in television. His final episode was a highly watched event, and it was clear that he was closing a significant chapter in his life. After retirement, he did not return to regular television work and avoided most media appearances. In his later years, there were reports about declining health. He spent much of his time away from public view, and very little was shared about his personal condition. Friends and close contacts respected his desire for privacy, so updates about his health were limited. What was known was that he remained mostly at home and avoided public attention. Johnny Carson passed away in January 2005. His death marked the end of a long and highly influential career in television. In his final years, he had stepped away from fame, choosing privacy over publicity. Even in decline, he remained a deeply private figure, with much of his personal life kept out of public view. His later years showed a man who had moved away from the spotlight after decades at its center, leaving behind both a massive career and a very private final chapter. And as attention turned to what he left behind, one final part of his story surprised almost everyone: the $156 million estate. Johnny Carson passed away in January 2005 at the age of 79. His death marked the end of one of the most important careers in American television history. News of his passing spread quickly, and fans, fellow entertainers, and media outlets reacted with sadness and respect. For many people, it felt like the closing of a long chapter in entertainment, since Carson had been a nightly presence on television for more than 3 decades. At the time of his death, his fortune was widely estimated to be around $156 million. This wealth came from many years of hosting The Tonight Show, along with smart financial decisions, investments, and careful management of his earnings. Carson was one of the highest-paid television personalities of his time, and he had built a very strong financial foundation during his long career. What made his estate even more interesting was how private he had always been about his personal finances and planning. Unlike many celebrities, Carson did not share details about his will or how his money would be divided. He kept his legal and financial arrangements extremely private, which meant that even people close to him did not fully know what to expect after his death. When the details of his estate began to surface, one major point surprised many people. A very large portion of his fortune was left to his 4th wife, Alexis Moss. She received the overwhelming share of the estate, which included most of his remaining wealth. This decision stood out because it showed how much trust and importance he placed in his final marriage compared to earlier relationships. Other parts of his estate were distributed in a more limited way. Carson did make provisions for certain individuals and organizations, but these were much smaller compared to the share left to his wife. Some family members and people who expected to be included more heavily were reportedly surprised by the final arrangement. However, because Carson had planned his estate carefully and legally, his decisions were followed as written. The handling of his will was done with a high level of privacy. Legal proceedings and estate management were kept mostly out of the public eye. This was consistent with how Carson lived his later years, where he avoided media attention and kept his personal life very protected. Lawyers and estate managers worked through the process quietly, ensuring that his wishes were carried out without major public conflict. There were no large public legal battles or long disputes that made headlines, which is somewhat unusual for a celebrity estate of this size. The process was managed in a controlled way, and most details were only shared in general terms. This helped maintain the privacy that Carson valued throughout his life. In the end, the final settlement reflected a carefully planned and private approach to his wealth. His fortune was not only large, but also structured in a way that showed clear personal choices about who would benefit most from it. While the public focused on the surprising size of the inheritance left to one person, the legal process itself remained quiet and respectful. Johnny Carson's death closed the story of his life, but the details of his estate added one final moment of shock and curiosity for the public, especially around how such a massive fortune was ultimately handled. And even after everything was revealed, one question still lingered in people's minds about the private decisions behind his final years. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like the video, share it, and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden lives of Hollywood legends.